Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Now, I will say, I was proud of Mr. And I forgot to back up. Let me back up. Meet Mr. Floyd McKissick. I've talked about him a couple of times. He was in the leadership role for CORE and also the NAACP. And he was very intimately acquainted with Martin Luther King Jr., MLK. So let's get into it. This one too is kind of an interesting story time because this man went from CORE and sit-in and desegregation in the 60s to working for the Nixon administration in 1975. And to me, if you know about Nixon and his views towards our people, minority people, baby, your discernment was lacking, Mr. McKissick. But we're going to go ahead and let's talk about him. He was born on March 9, 1922 in Asheville, North Carolina, and he attended Morehouse College in Atlanta before going off to serve in World War II. Then when he came back, he joined CORE and completed his time in Morehouse College. He was also the youth chairman for the NAACP, the North Carolina branch, and after finishing school, he applied for University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill's law school, but he was denied because, he was not white. And so he sued with NAACP's lawyer, Thurgood Marshall, and a judge ruled in their favor in 1951 and granted him admission to UNC. However, he did not go because he had already completed his law degree at North Carolina Central College. And so he was a trailblazer. He set the way and paved the way and helped others get in to UNC. Now, as an attorney, McKissick defended civil rights activists who were arrested for participating in sit-ins at lunch counters, as well as represented children in public school desegregation lawsuits. McKissick, who also handled cases for CORE, was elected to CORE's national board in 1963 and became the national director in 1966. When James Meredith was shot in 1966 while on a Freedom March, McKissick and MLK decided to resume James Meredith March, and they met up with Stokely. And as I mentioned in the past, Stokely was the chairman for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And they got together and continued Meredith's March, or co-led Meredith's March, which is called Meredith's March Against Fear. And I have a photo of that. It is a Getty's image, so I hope I don't get, any trouble. I do keep the accreditation up there. So this is an image of them at the march holding hands. To the left, you have McKissick. In the center, you have Martin Luther King. And on the... the child, it's the camera's flipped, so I hope I'm saying this correct. But the younger guy who's next to the guy with the glasses and the lips tooted up, that is Mr. Stokely, Mr. Stokely Carmichael. And here's another image of the three where you have McKissick is on the side of MLK, who's wearing the sunglasses, and then you have Mr. Carmichael over there clutching his chest and smiling and laughing at someone during a march. So in 1960s, MLK and McKissick had a difference in agreement on respect of nonviolence, or to nonviolence. McKissick started to understand Mr. Stokely more, and after Meredith's March, and it got to the point where McKissick was like, I'm going to advocate not just nonviolence, I'm going to advocate for self-defense, somebody, nuck if you buck. If you nuck at me, I'm going to buck at you, we ain't turning the other cheek. I love saying that because, your girl, she a Christian. And not for play. She is a Christ follower. Anyways, and that's my struggle, baby. Sorry to digress, but that's my struggle. Because I'd be like, Lord, I don't know how many times I could turn my cheek. I be want to go back to my ratchet, okay? So, as Sarah J says, she's righteous and ratchet. But anyways, back to Mr. McKissick. So after the Mayor's March, McKissick continued to advocate for nonviolence as a tactic in demonstrations, but stated that activists have the right to strike back when hit, arguing self-defense and nonviolence are not incompatible. McKissick embraced Black power, but different from Stokely, McKissick defined the term to mean building political and economic power in African-American communities and not just the militancy that Stokely was behind. Now, MLK was against both of them. He was like, no, this has worked for us. Of course, he took Gandhi's approach that got India free from the British. But MLK was like, I refuse to take programmatic action around defense violence. Like, he's just like, nah, fam, we're not doing that. Despite these areas of differences, MLK and McKissick agreed to oppose the Vietnam War and appeared together in support of Black athletes boycotting the 1968 Olympics. With MLK, and that just reminds me of people who say they don't want to be entertained. They want to be entertained for the NFL. They don't want to see anything political. Really? Anyways, when MLK was assassinated in 1968, McKissick called it a horror for all Americans that are apostles of nonviolence should be gunned down on American streets. Oh, he was big mad. And he advocated for a national holiday in MLK's honor. So McKissick resigned also from court in 1968. And I said 1975, it was 1972, so correction. In July of 1972, McKissick received federal funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to create Soul City, an integrated community under Black and white leadership in North Carolina. A few months later, McKissick caused a stir because, Black folks, we already knew what was the tea. Because he became a minority campaign chairman for President Richard Nixon's re-election. So this is after Nixon has already showed his behind, who he was in his first term. They say history repeats itself. And then I heard one person say history don't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. It definitely seems like there's some deja vu. But, Nixon was not reelected because back then the country had some sense where they got sent evidence. Okay, Congress had some sense. Even the Republican Party did. And they was full of racist, child. Remember I said McLeod was trying to get people to switch over from supporting Republicans, the party of Lincoln, who freed the slaves, when the Dixiecrats switched over from being Democrats to Republicans because they were mad at LBJ, who was a Democrat, who desegregated the South. And anyways, though, and LBJ even said, like, we will never win the South again, not by white people. So that is, lastly, Soul City was declared economically unviable in 1979. Again, this is the city that McKissick created from funds from Richard Nixon administration. And the Soul City land was taken over by the federal government. He returned to law, and he was reported to a judgeship in the Ninth Circuit Judicial District in 1990, and he died of lung cancer a year later and was buried in Soul City. I guess he was a smoker. I don't know. I didn't say that. My source here is Stanford University. But yeah, very interesting story. At least got to create a city. And at least it wasn't burnt down like Tulsa. I mean, it wasn't economically viable. So, I'm watching Mississippi Burning. During my research, I found out some stuff. So I'm watching that now. And one of the dudes was like, his dad was poor, but he was competing with a poor Black man, and the poor Black man was so successful he was able to buy a mule, and his dad killed or poisoned the water that the mule drank. And he was like, you ain't nobody, if you can't compete with a Black man. And that's the sentiment to this day that a lot of people have that don't understand that we should be supporting one another against the very rich and powerful.